Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. The years 1836 to 1838 were some of the most tumultuous in Mormon history. It included the excommunication of Oliver Cowder, the Whitmer brothers, the Fanny Alger affair, and the Kirtland Banking Crisis, just to name a few of the major events that occurred during this time. There were lots of changing alliances, and so in our next conversation with Bruce Van Orden, author of We'll Sing and We'll Shout, The Life and Times of WW Phelps, we'll talk about these trying times and how WW Phelps dealt with some of these situations. Check out our conversation.
So, can you give us your thoughts on the whole Fanny Alger episode?
Well, it doesn't pertain to Phelps, but I'm willing to give my thoughts.
Yeah.
I guess I'm pretty much in harmony with Brian Hales, where he says this was a marriage that was God approved between Joseph Smith and Fanny Alger. Hales calls it a priesthood marriage. It wasn't a sealing yet because the sealing authority had not been restored, and Joseph Smith didn't understand that, and he wasn't talking in terms of sealing like he did with the plural marriages in Nauvoo later.
So you think this took place?
I think it was an unfortunate thing. I think he may have been infatuated with Fanny.
Joseph.
She was living in the home. Who knows? I mean, we don't have the records. There are two possibilities. Either he did this totally out of harmony with God, adultery, as some people have alleged, or he did it with God's approval. And I choose to believe, based on my belief system, that Joseph Smith was the prophet of God, that this was done with God's approval. But I think it was a mistake. I think it was a wrong thing to do.
Oh, that's interesting. I know there's some question on the dating, and I just had a conversation on Facebook with somebody. He said it was definitely, the marriage to Fanny was definitely after the Elijah visit in April 1836, but I know Brian had thought it was earlier than that.
No, I'm absolutely certain it was 1835.
Okay, so you go with the earlier 1835. So Elijah hadn't appeared yet.
Right.
And
speaking of that, I mean, we make a huge deal today, in retrospect, talking about Elijah and the keys and the restoration and those four heavenly visitors in the Kirtland Temple in April of 1836 after the temple was dedicated. Oh, the restoration of the keys. They didn't talk about it back then. They didn't mention it then. And when sealing went forward in Nauvoo, it wasn't saying, oh, Elijah brought back the sealing keys, I'm doing what Elijah wanted. He didn't say that. We've kind of concluded that it has to do with Elijah and the keys, and that may be true, but this whole idea of keys and the restoration of priesthood authority and priesthood ways of doing things, they hadn't got it all clarified. We now have it, okay, it's this and this and this and this, but they didn't have it clarified in their minds.
Well, and that's been my big confusion, because even if we're willing to go with April 1836, which I think is still under dispute, but let's assume that's true. Oliver was there with Joseph.
Yes.
And so how is it that Oliver would have been confused about that vision if
I don't think he was confused, and I think he was in harmony, and I think he was probably feeling okay about everything, and Joseph feeling okay about him right then. And then in retrospect, after he got annoyed in 1837 over economic and political affairs, then he remembered this scrape between Emma and the idea of having this girl, Fanny, connected cohabitatingly with Joseph Smith. I think he resurrected that idea and brought it up then again. I don't think it was a major factor for him back in 35 and 36. It became a factor for him again in 1837 when he thought about it, when he no longer felt he was in harmony with Joseph Smith.
Yeah. So, okay. So that just became another reason another issue between Oliver and Joseph.
And it's become, in the eyes of many people, the issue, but it's not. Really.
You don't think it was the most important issue?
No, I don't think it was.
What was the most important issue?
Well, I think it was how they disagreed about what was going on with the bank, and then the animosity settled in, and Oliver said, "You're trying to dictate to us how we're supposed to live our lives, and with our property, and how we spend our own money, and how we buy and sell our property, and I won't stand for that. This is a republic."
That's interesting. So finances were a bigger issue than
yes, I believe so. I mean, that this comes up, and since we're all titillated by sexual things, we kind of think, oh, okay, that's the deal.
That's an interesting perspective. All right, so let's see. So 1838 was quite a year. You start with the Kirtland Banking Crisis. You end it in the middle, I guess. Oliver and Phelps and the Whitmers were excommunicated, leading up to Hans Mill, which was October.
Well, there's even more to that. When Sidney Rigdon arrived with Joseph Smith, he was convinced, with the help of some of his aides, that the saints would no longer put up with any more people inside or outside this church doing us harm. We will stand up and we will fight, and we will not take it anymore. You know,
is that the July 4th sermon?
June. It was July 4th, but the Salt sermon in June 17th, and then the July 4th sermon. Yes, those two. It's not one.
Right.
But leading up to the Salt sermon, he set up an affidavit or a petition that was signed by 85 brethren, insisting that the dissidents leave town, and if they did not leave town far west, it would be at the expense of their property and maybe their life and limb, and you better just get out of here. That was the directive. And it listed by name some of these people: Oliver Cowder, David Whitmer, John Whitmer, WW Phelps, Lyman White. Get out of here. Well, they did, except Phelps, but I'll get back to Phelps in a second. They fled with just a little bit of property, and they went over to where William McClellan, the more also recent apostate, was living in Clay County, and stayed with him a couple of weeks. But then they decided that they would take up residence in Richmond County, where they would be recognized as now former Mormons, and the Richmond people who didn't like Mormons would take them in, would allow them to be there. And sure enough, the Whitmers, for the rest of their existence, headquartered in Richmond, and set up good businesses and were top flight citizens for the next 30, 40 years. But Phelps, on the other hand, said, "I'm not guilty of all these accusations against me. I'm willing to comply with what the church and the leadership says I should do. Please allow me to stay." He maybe was thinking about his family. He was older than these other guys, the Whitmers. And the revelation came to Joseph Smith. It's dated July 5th, 1838. It's not in the Doctrine and Covenants, but it's in the Joseph Smith papers, and it's in the documentation. And another apostate at this point, a member of the First Presidency, Frederick G. Williams, had also been cut off. And the revelation was for Phelps and Frederick G. Williams to be rebaptized and ordained elders and sent on missions. In other words, reinstated. And so they were reinstated in July of 1838. Phelps stayed. I want to say that I feel really, really bad to this day and hour that the Whitmers were driven out of the church. Mm-hmm. We think of the Whitmers as early pioneers in the building of the kingdom of God. David Whitmer, John Whitmer, Peter Whitmer Sr., who hosted, Mary Whitmer, who had this other vision of Moroni, supposedly.
Right.
All of those fine people who had done so much were driven out of town, and not one of them came back. And it turns out that WW Phelps and John Whitmer were very close friends throughout Jackson County, Clay County, into Kirtland, and then back to far west. They were partners in doing all these things together. They loved each other, and even after both fell into apostasy, they retained their friendship. And then when Phelps came back in Nauvoo, he kept in contact with John Whitmer. They loved each other very much, and because of that, I've come to love John Whitmer too. I think John Whitmer is one of the greatest guys we've had in the Restoration. He was more important in the whole scheme of things than David Whitmer, even though we think of David Whitmer as one of the three witnesses, and he was, but John Whitmer did more for the kingdom than David Whitmer did, and I feel it is a tragedy that the entire Whitmer family was driven away and not brought back because they're good people.
Yeah, I think we don't emphasize the Whitmers as much as we probably should, especially in those early days. So Phelps wasn't out of the church very long after this excommunication then, right?
His excommunication with that power play by Marsh and Patton and a few High Council members took place in March. Then Joseph Smith and Sidney Rigdon arrived in late March. And then the Danites were formed, and the Whitmers and Oliver Cowder driven out. Phelps begged for forgiveness, got back in early July, and was with the church the entire time of the Mormon-Missouri War. In fact, he had a minor role to play in that period, culminating with his being one of the peace commissioners that tried to work out peace between the saints, the far west ones, and Samuel Lucas, the general of the militia. Of course, Lucas reneged on that agreement that it was just going to be a peace parley, and he took Joseph Smith and Sidney Rigdon and Hiram Smith and a few others into captivity when it was supposed to be just a peace conference. But that peace conference was worked out by Hinkle and Phelps and a couple of others, Clemenson. So he was part of that period, but in the church. He didn't get cut off from the church until March of 1839, when the Exodus had been essentially completed, getting all the 12,000 or so Latter-day Saints out of Caldwell and Davies counties into Adams County, Quincy, Illinois. And then there was a conference held in the church under Brigham Young's direction, who had become the president of the 12, because Marsh had been cut off by this time. Marsh had turned against Joseph Smith. So Brigham Young presided over a conference. Joseph Smith was still in jail. This was in March of 1839. And in that conference, a member of the High Council, George Harris, made a motion that, and he listed about 10 men, should be cut off from the church because they were opposed to Joseph Smith and brought about all this horrible thing. And he listed Hinkle and Marsh and WW Phelps and Frederick G. Williams. And by motion and raise of hands, these guys were cut off from the church again. So this is Phelps' second excommunication.
Well, I do want to go there because it's so close to the 1838 thing. I want to back up just a little bit though. Let's because there's the Battle of Crooked River,
right,
where Patton dies. So can you tell us a little bit about what led up to that battle and that sort of thing?
Well, the Mormon-Missouri War started August 6th, 1838, at the election place in Gallatin, Davies County, the county seat. There were the few hundred Missourians who already lived there, plus a lot of new Mormons who had just moved in, and there was about an equal number of Mormons and non-Mormons, and it was going to be obvious that maybe a new sheriff might be picked by the Mormons because they were having so much political power, obviously, coming in.
And Gallatin's in which county?
Davies County, the county seat.
Okay.
And opponents started with clubs to keep the Mormons out of the polling place, and we fought back, and that ignited hostilities in Davies County, and one thing led to another, and before long there was open fighting going on. We call it the Mormon-Missouri War, that started August 6th and ended November 1st.
So August 6th was the election. I know Alex Baugh had mentioned, they call it the battle at Gallatin. He said basically it was just a fist fight.
Right. It was a fist fight with a couple of clubs, I think.
Okay. So basically, because if I remember right, Dr. Baugh said the people in Davies County were saying, well, you're supposed to vote in Caldwell County. You're not supposed to be.
Well, part of the deal was there had been an agreement, a gentleman's agreement, and it wasn't constitutional, that said that people can't move from one county to another. We do that in America. But there was this gentleman's agreement. The Mormons would stay in Caldwell County. But then they needed more place, and so they started moving into Daviess County, where there was water and timber, and established actually a community which they called Adamon Diamond, based on a revelation about that being a sacred place. And before long, we had plenty of people.
Yeah. Okay, so that's where the Election Day battle at Gallatin, August 6th, and that was a fight over whether they could vote or not.
Yes.
And so then it seems like some hostages were taken. Is that right?
Well, part of the battle was then over in Carroll County. The Latter-day Saints had also established a new settlement over there called DeWitt.
Mm-hmm.
It was on the Missouri River. It was going to be a port that Latter-day Saints from Ohio and from other parts of the country would arrive at that port and then be taken to the various settlements. And the people in Carroll County didn't like us either, and so there were battles taking place there, and that was part of the war. As the war unfolded, there were 3 attacks made by Latter-day Saint Danite / militia members on 3 settlements in Daviess County. One of them was led by Patton, to go, and they end up destroying and burning out these other settlements and sending people on their way. And so that was a depredation performed by us, by our people, in this war, and that was quite illegal what they did. We call it maybe an act of war or whatever, but it was led by Danite guys.
Yeah.
And Phelps witnessed this. He saw it happen, and therefore when he testified in that court of inquiry in November in Richmond, he testified of what was happening, and because he did and kind of spilled the beans about what Mormons had done in that war illegally, people thought he was an enemy, and of course that kind of led to Phelps's downfall.
Second excommunication. Yeah. So there were, because if I remember right, the Battle of Crooked River, some Mormons were taken prisoner.
Okay. That battle, back to that. That's in Caldwell County, southern
Okay.
Caldwell County. It's a stream, Crooked River, and some militia members from Missouri militia who were opposed to us, however, were going to come and attack Mormon settlements, and Captain Fearnought, Patton, recognized that this was happening, and so he gathered together a fighting force and attacked, and he was fearless, and he went in, and he was at the head of the Mormon group, and he was shot and slain. But it's a little unclear as to how many hostages were taken, but the word went back that the Mormon contingent had killed all sorts of these Missourians, when in fact they weren't, and it was the Mormons who were killed, a couple of them. But the word went back to Jefferson City, and that led to the attack on Far West, along with what Marsh had said in his affidavit, saying how the Mormons had committed all these depredations.
So this was in between August and October,
This was not
right?
October. This is late October.
Oh, this is late October.
Things happened really rapidly in
Yeah.
October. There's a battle of Crooked River, and then the word went back how terrible that was for the Missourians.
Which was not true.
Right, and then the affidavit came from Marsh, which seemed to underscore all the bad things the Mormons were doing, including Joseph Smith. And so Governor Boggs had all sorts of justification in his mind at least, to have the Extermination Order, which was to get rid of all Mormons from the state of Missouri.
Right. Yeah. And I know Dr. Baugh has said that it wasn't to kill Mormons, it was just to say, get out of here.
That's
correct.
correct. That's correct, yeah.
So, and then, of course, that leads up to Hans Mill, which was basically Halloween.
It seems to be a result of people hearing about it.
Yeah.
And a retaliation.
So there were a lot of rumors, false rumors, I guess we could say, that Missourians died, but no Missourians were ever killed in any of these raids, even though, Missourians were burning Mormon houses, Mormons were burning, or Danites were burning Missourians' houses.
Mormons were burning houses in Daviess County in 3 different settlements. So we did our part too.
But, I know if we go back to Jackson County, we've been kicked out of Jackson County, we've been kicked out of Caldwell County, we've been kicked out of Daviess County. There are a lot of people, and I know Dr. Baugh is like, we were just fed up. We were tired of it. And so while I know what the Mormons did was illegal, a lot of the stuff that the Missourians did was illegal. I mean, do you have some sympathy for Mormon reactions in Missouri?
Oh, of course. I grew up believing that the Latter-day Saints did nothing wrong whatsoever, and it was just these meanness and bad people who caused all this. B.H. Roberts had written about it, and what we had in the Improvement era when I was growing up said we were just mistreated right and left by all these ugly Missourians. I've come to an equation. I feel that the Mormon-Missouri War had depredations on both sides, but about 80% of the bad things that took place in the Mormon-Missouri War were performed by Missourians, including the governor and his attitude, and 20% by the Latter-day Saints. And so, yes, the majority of the bad things were the Missourians, but we were not
blameless. Yeah. And basically, the escalation of us burning Missouri settlements just made it even worse. It did not even help. And so you said that that Marsh, that Phelps. Well, it was Phelps and Marsh who both testified that Mormons.
Marsh didn't even testify at all.
Oh, I thought he did.
He had that affidavit.
Okay.
Co-authored, or at least co-signed, by Orson Hyde, another member of the 12. Orson Hyde was on the outs too, remember, for 3 or 4 months, but he came back and begged for forgiveness and got out of his disfellowshipment really quick and back into the 12 and in good standing. But this is also part of the reason why he lost his seniority. Remember that he was older than John Taylor in the 12.
Right.
And when Brigham Young died, there were 2 members of the original 12 still living, Orson Pratt and Orson Hyde, and both of them had been stripped of their seniority for having been out of the 12 for a period of time.
And it was just a few months, right? It wasn't very long.
In Orson Hyde's case, about 3 months, and in Orson Pratt's case, about the same, yeah. But they both were out and had to be reinstated, and therefore the presiding apostle after Brigham Young died was John Taylor, not those 2. See?
And so that's why Taylor was the third president. Yeah. Instead of, it would have been Hyde or Pratt?
It probably would have been Hyde, because he was older than Orson Pratt.
Okay, that's interesting.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dr. Bruce Van Orden. This milk and stripping story about Thomas B. Marsh leaving the church over offense about his wife is a very big story, still talked about in today's Sunday school lessons. Was that the real reason Thomas B. Marsh left the church?
Annie had been offended by this milk stripping issue, although I think that's a minor event rather than the main event.
Right.
But as a minor event, it had offended him and his family. And so he decided in mid-October 1838, I'm against Joseph Smith now. And then he wrote that affidavit giving great detail to what the Danites had done and attributing it to Joseph Smith.
If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, please subscribe for just $5 a month at patreon.com/gospeltangents, and you can hear the entire interview before everybody else. If you'd like to watch the entire video for just $8 a month, you can either subscribe on YouTube, Patreon, or my website, gospeltangents.com. Just click the yellow subscribe button, and I'll add you to our Gospel Tangents Insiders group so that you can see entire videos. For those interested in a PDF transcript, you can subscribe at either Patreon or on my website. For just $10 a month, I'll send you a PDF as soon as it's complete.
If you'd like a copy of the paperback as well as a PDF, just sign up for $20 a month at either Patreon or my website, gospeltangents.com. Of course, you can buy individual transcripts at Amazon.com and just do a search for Gospel Tangents interview and you can see all the things that we have there. Don't forget to support Gospel Tangents with an awesome t-shirt like one of these. You can subscribe at Apple Podcasts at tinyurl.com/gospeltangents. Get our latest updates at facebook.com/gospeltangents. Also, you can get our Twitter updates at Gospel Tangents. Click here to subscribe, here for a transcript, and over here we've got more of our great videos. Thanks again.